From the heart of Kuwait, we greet you. This afternoon, our region unfortunately continues to stand at historic and dangerous crossroads. As the flames of conflict intensify, the state of Kuwait remains, as always, a fortress of sovereignty and a voice for regional stability. The repercussions of the ongoing war with Iran have reached our very shores. Following treacherous drone attacks targeting our national infrastructure, while the world watches the escalating exchange between the regional powers, Kuwait finds itself navigating the storm with a firm hand and an unwavering commitment to its people. This afternoon, we ask the questions every Kuwaiti and resident is holding. What are the next steps for our national defense? How is the GCC unified in the face of these unprecedented violations? And where does the path to peace lie in a region clouded by the smoke of war? I am Sheikha Tamimi, and this is our continuous live special coverage on Kuwait TV2.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة من خلال مراكزها البرية والبحرية والمطارات، ونحن نعمل وفق خطط طوارئ متكاملة بتجهيزات متطورة وكوادر مدربة على أعلى مستوى لضمان سرعة الاستجابة وكفاءة التعامل مع مختلف البلاغات سواء كانت خطرة أو بسيطة. وهذا الاستعداد والجاهزية لدينا مستمرة على مدار العام حفاظاً على سلامة الأرواح والممتلكات وتحقيق الأمن المجتمعي.
The United States signals readiness for diplomacy with Iran, but under the shadow of escalating military pressure. Washington is awaiting Tehran's response to the 15-point proposal to end the war, while Iran insists it will dictate the terms of any settlement. As strikes continue across the region and U.S. troops come under attack, the question now is whether diplomacy can prevail or if the conflict is heading toward a wider escalation. For details, stay tuned.
According to the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, Washington is pursuing what it describes as strategy of strength and diplomacy. He emphasized that the United States is demonstrating significant military and political pressure on Tehran, while still actively seeking a negotiated resolution. At the center of these efforts is a 15-point proposal put forward by Washington. The plan reportedly addresses key issues including uranium enrichment, the demonstrating of nuclear stockpiles, and the implementation of strict international monitoring mechanisms aimed at preventing future nuclear development. Witkoff confirmed that the United States is currently awaiting Iran's official response to this proposal. He also revealed that U.S. President Donald Trump has extended the diplomatic deadline, calling the move a positive step and signaling that talks are still ongoing, even if both sides interrupt the nature of those negotiations very differently.
But we have an adjournment, we have an extension. We view it as a real positive. The Iranians, there are some people there who have denied that we're negotiating. I think we know, everybody in this room knows we are negotiating, it's clear. Some ships are coming through. We may have a different definition of negotiating than they do, or there may be people within their system today who just don't have the ability to admit it. But we're talking to them.
But from Tehran, the tone is far less conciliatory. An Iranian military spokesperson delivered a stark and defiant message, declaring that Iran considers itself the victor and will ultimately dictate the terms from ending the conflict. The statement highlights 100 strands from Iran's leadership, even as international presence continues to mount. Meanwhile, Washington is doubling down on its doctrine of peace through strength. The U.S. maintains a significant military presence across the Middle East, reinforcing its strategic positions while keeping diplomatic channels open, at least for now. Sources indicate that the U.S. proposal includes several sweeping demands. These include a complete halt to uranium enrichment, the full dismantling of Iran's nuclear stockpile, strict limitations of its ballistic missile program, and guarantees from secure navigation through the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. Additionally, the proposal calls for Iran to cease its support for allied groups operating across the region. However, while diplomacy plays out behind closed doors, the situation on the ground is rapidly escalating. U.S. and Israeli occupation strikes have reportedly targeted key nuclear and industrial facilities inside Iran. In response, Bahrain has launched missile and drone attacks across the Gulf, raising fears of a border regional confrontation. As both sides hold firm to their positions, the path forward remains uncertain, caught between the pressures of military escalation and the narrowing window for diplomacy. The coming days may prove crucial in determining whether this crisis moves toward resolution or further conflict.
Our first guest, or rather correspondent, is Najib El-Khash, who is coming to us live from Tokyo. Mr. Najib, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good day to you, to the audience. Good to be with you.
I hope you are doing well. As the regional conflict approaches the day 29 and we face unprecedented security climate following the events of February 28th and the ongoing regional Epic Fury campaign. Can you give me any updates on your end, as I'm pretty sure that your viewers would like to hear about what are the possible repercussions or updates regarding this war up until all the way to Asia?
Well, yes, on the political front, we hear from the American administration on Japan to participate in the war and to send the naval forces to Hormuz. However, this is not allowed according to Japanese law and Japanese constitution, which prevents war. And that was the hot topic during the Japanese-American summit last week between Prime Minister Takaichi and President Trump. Now, with the ongoing negotiations between Iran and the United States, the discussions here in Tokyo are about the role that Japan could play in when it comes to using Japanese technology to do mine sweeping, because, as we know, Iranian forces laid a lot of mines to hinder navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. So Japan has the technology to treat that and to do mine sweeping. But Japan is reluctant to do so at the moment, although the American administration is pressuring it, because some lawmakers in the parliament here said that if Japan starts doing mine sweeping, and if Iran has put those mines, Iran could consider that as an act of war against Iran. And regardless of the actual reaction of Iran, this breaches the Japanese constitution, which prohibits Japan from doing any actions that could be interpreted as an act of war and from entering war. On the other side, Japan is also considering to change its laws, maybe in April, to allow or facilitate the export of Japanese arms, which was a taboo until recently, and Japanese law was changed in 2014 to allow the export of defensive equipment only, not lethal or destructive weapons. So this might change next month. It seems that the government, which currently has a large majority in the Japanese Diet. The Japanese Diet is the name of the Japanese parliament. For those so in the Diet, the Japanese government currently, the ruling coalition has a majority and they can pass any law they wish to pass. So going to happen, and maybe from next month we will see that Japan is able to export arms for the first time since the Second World War. Some exceptions that happened very early after the World War in the form of exporting some guns to help police in Southeast Asian nations. Now, on the economic front, the yen is weakened by the oil prices. Oil prices are rising in Japan, and actually the U.S. dollar, the value of U.S. dollar has exceeded 160 yen, which means that the Central Bank of Japan is going to face very tough decisions also in April. And some observers are discussing the fact that might resort to raising interest, which means that the long-term monetary easing policy of the Japanese government might change soon. Although the government actually, the current government achieved its landslide win in the election based on monetary stimulus and the monetary easing policies of monetary easing, but all that might have to change because of the war. And when we have like 160 yen for the dollar, that means that the Japanese exports will be expanding, but at the same time, Japanese imports, including, for example, food, will be the prices will rise sharply. And actually, the Japanese Prime Minister had promised to cancel the consumption tax on food for 2 years. That was her campaign slogan. So now many people are doubting if she can do that under circumstances and with the rising prices.
Mr. Najib Al-Khash, thank you so much for your valuable input regarding any updates coming all the way from Tokyo. Now, dear viewers, we will take a short break and we will be back.
تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
Moving on, G7 allies urged a stop to attacks against civilians in the Middle East war after a foreign ministers meeting in France attended by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio almost 1 month into the U.S.-Israeli occupation assault against Iran. Here's more information.
G7 allies on Friday urged a stop to attacks against civilians in the Middle East war after a foreign ministers meeting in France attended by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio almost 1 month into the U.S.-Israeli occupation assault against Iran. A final statement on the war in the Middle East called for an immediate cessation of attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure. Rubio added that there can be no justification for the deliberate targeting of civilians in situations of armed conflict, as well as attacks on diplomatic facilities. U.S. President Donald Trump had threatened to strike Iranian energy facilities, but rode back that warning to give Tehran more time for talks he said were taking place. The G7 meeting was dominated by uncertainty over the current U.S. strategy in the Middle East conflict. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephol said after the meeting that the Iranian regime would be well advised to enter into serious negotiations with the United States now. He added that there are initial indications that such talks should be taking place. Whitefall said the international community needed to collaborate even more closely now it was dealing with two wars in which Russia and Iran were cooperating, including the conflict sparked by Moscow's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The UK's Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper urged a swift resolution to this conflict that restores regional stability. Cooper echoed concerns over the de facto blockade by Iran of the key Strait of Hormuz, which has driven up global oil prices and left vessels queuing up to enter the energy bottleneck. Cooper said Iran cannot be able to just hold the global economy hostage. The final statement said ministers had reiterated the absolute necessity to permanently restore safe and toll-free freedom of negotiation in the Strait of Hormuz. Rubio said he had made progress with allies in opposing Iranian threats to start tolling vessels. Rubio added that it's dangerous to the world and it's important that the world have a plan to confront it.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقواته دائما على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
Deeper into the same topic, as the G7 convenes in Brussels, discussions come at a critical moment marked by escalating tensions in the Middle East and a growing pressure on the global energy system. Nearly 50 years after its establishment in response to an oil crisis, the group once again faces a complex intersection of security, economic stability, and geopolitical alignment. However, today's context reveals clear divisions, particularly between the United States and its European partners, over how to address the evolving situation with Iran and its wider implications. With rising concerns over energy security, disruptions in key shipping routes, and questions surrounding the cohesion of Western policy, the outcomes of this meeting carry significant weight beyond the immediate crisis. Joining us virtually from Brussels is Mohammed Barakat, political analyst, to discuss the situation. Welcome to our live special coverage this afternoon, Mr. Mohammed.
Welcome.
Our first question is the meeting returns to the same place where the group was founded in 1975 to address an oil crisis. Will Rubio succeed in convincing the Europeans that their enemy today is the Iranian-Russian axis, or do the Europeans see Washington's policies as the biggest threat to the stability of the global economy at present?
Even if Europeans still thinking that Russia is considered as an enemy because of the war in Ukraine and the economic sanctions on Russia, now they are convinced that President Trump policies against EU and also against NATO member states countries, with what is happening now in Iran, many EU member and partners of USA, many prime ministers, especially in Spain and others, consider that President Trump policies and his attacks with Israel against Iran as the biggest threat on peace in the world, not only in the Middle East and in the Gulf. And also it's a threat to the economy in all over the world. Europeans tried to convince the USA to conclude an agreement on the Iranian nuclear program, but they failed.
Now, on the timing and participation, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio joined the meeting today after missing the initial sessions. How did his presence affect the tone of the discussions, and do you observe any signs of a softening in the American stance toward European demands for restraint?
There have been no changes in the American position. He tried to convince the G7 member states countries to provide military aid in the Israeli-American attacks against Iran, but without any significant changes in their position, just as with the NATO and EU member states. Some countries want to participate, but as a defensive participation, not to participate in the attacks against Iran.
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, most countries would like to or would adopt a defensive stance regarding the regional situation as to not escalate the current crisis even further. Did Rubio come to convince NATO countries to participate in securing the Strait of Hormuz as well in exchange for easing President Trump's criticism of the alliance? And how did Kaja Kallas and the European side respond to this offer? And how was the issue of Russian support for Iran used as a European pretext to refuse military involvement without guarantees in Ukraine?
Mr. Rubio tried to convince NATO countries to participate in securing the Strait of Hormuz, but they didn't change their position. The European side criticized the threat made by President Trump and by Mr. Rubio against countries that will not participate in securing the Strait of Hormuz. And they feared direct military intervention, particularly against Russia. They want the United States to continue supporting Ukraine, given that USA has used in Iran weapons intended for Ukraine. They used to send these weapons to Ukraine, but USA is sending these weapons so as to use it in the war against Iran.
So due to the war, the U.S.-Israeli occupation war on Iran, the U.S. stance for the U.S. support, military support, has diminished because they're literally using the same weapons just to fight against Iran. On the expansion of the meeting, France extended invitations to countries such as Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and India. What message is Paris trying to send to Washington by involving these regional powers in discussions concerning energy security and the Strait of Hormuz?
France, especially President Emmanuel Macron, wants to make President Trump understand that other countries in the region are concerned by the war in Iran, such as Saudi Arabia, India, and that they must have their say, and also they have to participate in the efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz. But I think that now they are participating in negotiations with France so as to do that.
Now, moving on to forgotten issues or overlooked issues due to the escalating situation in the region. With the war on Iran dominating discussions, is there any real talk behind the scenes about the crises in Gaza and Ukraine? Or has the concern over oil prices and the closure of shipping lanes overshadowed everything else?
They discussed only the situation in Ukraine, and they tried to convince USA so as to participate more in sending weapons to Ukraine. But I think that the American position is still as it was before. They asked Europeans to buy weapons and pay for this, and then send it to Ukraine if they like.
So the discussions were actually somewhat dominated by the crisis in Ukraine, is that correct?
It's correct.
Now, on the transatlantic divide, today we see strenuous European efforts to narrow the differences with Washington regarding Iran. Do the Europeans, especially Germany and France in particular, possess any real leverage to persuade President Trump to abandon his unleash hell policy and return to diplomacy?
I don't think that they are able to persuade President Trump to abandon his unleash hell policy and return to diplomacy. President Trump has distanced the EU and its member states from the international stage. He even criticized the role of EU, the role of NATO, the role of European countries in NATO also. Well, I think it's going to be difficult to do that. He also criticized President Macron personally and many other prime ministers in the European Union. For this, I think personal relations between them are not so good now, and they are not going to be better during the next weeks because of what's happening now in Iran and in the world.
Now, on to energy security and the economy. Germany has openly complained that Washington's policies are harming its economy, with oil prices reaching record highs due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Could we witness a European rebellion within the G7 against U.S. sanctions?
Of course, Washington's policy are harming not only German economy, but also the economy in all European countries, especially with the introduction of customs duties by President Trump against the European countries. And the instability due to these decisions on the European markets.
Now, on the contradiction regarding the U.S. position, how do you explain President Trump's temporary easing of sanctions on Russian oil to compensate for supply shortages while simultaneously escalating tensions with Iran? Is this a tacit admission of the failure of the strategy to isolate Russia in favor of focusing on the Middle East?
I think relations between President Trump and President Putin are not so bad. Mr. Trump wants to exploit the raw materials located in the Ukrainian territories occupied and annexed by Russia. As soon as the war in Ukraine stopped, he can't isolate Russia, and the sanctions imposed against Russia have not had the desired effects. For this, I think the position of Mr. Trump against Russia is going to continue as it's now. Many experts said that he has interests with Russia, and Europeans are not sure that Mr. Trump is going to change his positions about that.
Well, Kaja Kallas asserts that there is evidence of Russian support for Iran, while Rubio downplays it, citing Russia's busyness. To what extent does Rubio's response reflect the Trump administration's desire to separate the conflict files, which are Ukraine, from Iran, to facilitate separate deals with President Putin away from European concerns?
Of course, President Trump administration wants to separate the conflict files so as to facilitate trying to find a solution in Ukraine. And as I said, Mr. Trump has economic interest with President Putin in Ukraine. For this, I don't think that he's going to be against the measures and the aid that and the support that Russia gives to Iran, so as to conserve, so as to have and to continue to have good relations between them.
Now, finally, Mr. Mohammed, how do you read the final declaration of the G7?
This one-page declaration has nothing new. They didn't speak about stopping, about a ceasefire in Iran. They didn't speak about the sanctions and about what Russia has to do and has to stop helping Iran in this war. Many observers said that this declaration was useless and nothing new in this declaration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Barakat, for your time and for your valuable input. For now, we'll take a quick break and we will be back to you, dear viewers.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقواته دائما على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة، خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
Now we move to local and regional news and updates. As we start locally, the National Guard official spokesperson Brigadier General Dr. Jad'an Fadl announced that the task force successfully downed 6 drones in the past 24 hours within its areas of responsibility. The Brigadier General stated that this action is part of ongoing efforts to enhance security, protect vital sites, and counter any potential threats, and urged everyone to adhere to the security and safety instructions issued by the relevant authorities. He affirmed that the National Guard forces, in cooperation with the Army, the police, and the fire department, are fully prepared to address any threats and resolutely confront anything that aims to destabilize the country's security, thereby ensuring its sovereignty, security and stability, and protecting its national interests and resources. We also have the Directorate General of Civil Aviation official spokesperson Abdullah Rajhi announcing that Kuwait International Airport was subjected to several drone attacks with no injuries reported, noting that the damage was limited to material losses. In a statement, Rajhi explained that the attack resulted in significant damage to the airport's radar system, saying that emergency teams and relevant authorities immediately responded to the incident, taking the necessary measures to comprehensively assess the situation and assure the safety of operations and restore operational readiness as quickly as possible. He emphasized the Directorate's full commitment and continued coordination with relevant authorities to take all necessary measures to maintain the security and safety of civil aviation in the state of Kuwait. On to regional updates, starting with Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Defense announcing today the interception and destruction of 3 drones in the past few hours. This came in a brief statement issued by the Ministry of Defense, delivered by its spokesperson, Major General Tulki Al-Malki. With this attack, the number of missiles and drones targeting the kingdom since the beginning of the Iranian attacks has risen to 803 drones, in addition to 65 missiles that include 58 ballistic missiles and 7 cruise missiles. The General Command of the Bahrain Defense Force announced that its air defense system continued to counter successive waves of Iranian terrorist attacks. Since the start of the aggression, 154 missiles and 362 drones targeting the Kingdom of Bahrain have been intercepted and destroyed. Now, Abu Dhabi's media office said 5 people were injured by debris in the Khalifa Economic Zone's Abu Dhabi, also known as KZAD, on Saturday morning after an Iranian ballistic missile was intercepted. Earlier, the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense announced that its air defenses intercepted 6 ballistic missiles and 9 drones launched from Iran. In a statement, the ministry explained that since the beginning of the Iranian attacks, UAE air defenses have intercepted 378 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and 1,835 drones. We also have the Oman News Agency reporting today that the port of Salalah was targeted by 2 drones, resulting in moderate injuries to a port worker and minor damage to one of the cranes at its facilities. The agency quoted a security source confirming that the Sultanate of Oman condemns these heinous attacks and will take all necessary measures to maintain the security of the country and the safety of its residents. Air raid sirens have sounded across the south of the occupied territories after a ballistic missile was launched from Yemen, marking the first such attack from Yemeni territory since the start of the conflict. Earlier, the Houthi military spokesperson announced the group's readiness to directly intervene, warning of a wider confrontation in response to what he described as U.S. and Israeli occupation aggression against Iran and regional allies. Now, moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States does not need to support NATO, criticizing the allies for failing to provide material backing during the war with Iran. Meanwhile, NATO chief Mark Rutte said European allies and Canada increased defense spending by 20% in 2025, urging continued efforts. On his part, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the cost of what he described as a meaningless, unlawful, and unnecessary war in the region is being borne not only by the parties involved, but by all of humanity. Speaking at a strategy meeting linked to the World Economic Forum in Istanbul, President Erdogan warned that the conflict is impacting global energy markets, trade, transport, and supply chains. Furthermore, he stressed that continued fighting would increase costs worldwide, regardless of geography, highlighting the growing risk to the global economic system, while also citing energy insecurity, supply chain disruptions, and rising protectionist policies as key threats to stability. The United Nations announced the creation of a task force to develop a new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz aimed at facilitating fertilizer trade and the movement of raw materials to reduce the humanitarian impact of the Iran war. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric warned that rising tensions in the Middle East are disrupting maritime trade, which could soon affect food production and humanitarian conditions, stressing that immediate action is necessary. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme cautioned that disrupted fertilizer supplies and rising energy prices could trigger global food price increases, with tens of millions of people at risk of acute hunger if the conflict continues. Back to the region, as the Israeli occupation airstrikes on Lebanon kill 14, injure dozens, and as escalation deepens in wider regional conflict, bringing the total number of casualties to more than 1,100 killed and over 3,300 wounded. Here's more details.
Israeli occupation forces have carried out a wave of intense airstrikes and artillery shelling across Lebanon, targeting at least 41 towns, cities, and residential areas in a single day. The majority of these attacks were concentrated in southern Lebanon, a region that has borne the brunt of the escalation. According to official reports, the strikes have killed at least 14 people and left around 50 others injured, many of them civilians. Rescue teams continue to search through damaged buildings, raising fears that the death toll could climb further. This latest escalation is part of a border and sustained Israeli occupation offensive that has been ongoing since early March. Figures released by the Lebanese Health Ministry indicate that the total number of casualties have now surpassed 1,100 killed and more than 3,300 wounded, highlighting the rapidly worsening humanitarian situation in the country. These developments are closely linked to the wider regional conflict involving Israeli occupation and the United States on one side and Iran on the other side. The fighting has already resulted in hundreds of casualties beyond Lebanon, making a significant and potentially dangerous shift in the balance of power across the Middle East. On the ground, Israeli occupation forces continue to maintain a military presence in parts of southern Lebanon. Some of these areas have been under occupation for decades, while others were seized during the most recent round of fighting between late 2023 and late 2024. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis is deepening at an alarming rate. Israeli occupation forces have issued evacuation orders for all residents south of the Zahrani River, instructing them to move north immediately and warning that failure to comply could put their lives at serious risk. These warnings have triggered mass displacement across the country. More than 1 million people have been forced from their homes. Many are now living in overcrowded shelters, schools, or even out in the open, facing severe shortages of food, water, and medical care. In addition, over 250,000 people have fled Lebanon entirely, seeking safety across borders. Among them, approximately 125,000 have crossed into Syria, nearly half of whom are children. As the violence continues and displacement rises, concerns are growing that the crisis could spiral even further, with long-term consequences not only for Lebanon, but for the stability of the entire region.
قوة الإطفاء العام على استعداد تام وجاهزية للتعامل مع أي طارئ على مدار الساعة من خلال مراكزها البرية والبحرية والمطارات، ونحن نعمل وفق خطط طوارئ متكاملة بتجهيزات متطورة وكوادر مدربة على أعلى مستوى لضمان سرعة الاستجابة وكفاءة التعامل مع مختلف البلاغات سواء كانت خطرة أو بسيطة. وهذا الاستعداد والجاهزية لدينا مستمرة على مدار العام حفاظاً على سلامة الأرواح والممتلكات وتحقيق الأمن المجتمعي.
Now, as regional tensions continue to escalate, the economic repercussions are becoming increasingly severe, particularly for Gulf states whose stability is closely tied to energy exports and secure trade routes. The effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has placed unprecedented pressure on the global oil markets, while raising urgent questions about the resilience of national economies, including Kuwait, in the face of prolonged disruption. With rising costs, constrained exports, and a growing uncertainty around regional security, the focus now shifts to strategic planning, not only to manage the immediate crisis, but to safeguard long-term economic and infrastructural stability. To discuss these developments, we are now joined virtually by Dr. Khalid Al-Sallal. Good afternoon, Dr. Khalid.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes.
Thank you so much for giving us a moment of your time. I want to ask with the first question, and with the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed, nearly 20% of global oil supply is off the market strategically. How long can Kuwait's financial buffers sustain the state's budget if this total export paralysis continues?
If the Strait of Hormuz were fully closed, Kuwait's oil exports and that's 85 to 90% of government revenue would halt, shifting the immediate challenge from oil prices to liquidity management. Kuwait has a strong buffer, like the General Reserve Fund, a massive sovereign wealth fund, and low debt allowing borrowing. Without intervention, spending could continue 6 to 12 months. Emergency measures like cutting expenditures and issuing debt could stretch this to like 1.5 to 3 years. More aggressive use of sovereign assets could sustain the state longer, though with economic trade-offs. The main constraint is liquidity and rapid decision-making, not total wealth. Strategically, a prolonged closure is unlikely due to probable international intervention. Kuwait is financially resilient, but duration is critical.
Indeed, Kuwait is financially resilient, and we are seeing a severe scenario where insurance and freight costs for Gulf shipping have reached record highs. Is there a strategic alternative for Kuwaiti trade, or is our economic survival entirely tied to the reopening of the strait?
In a severe scenario where shipping, insurance, and freight costs spike, Kuwait faces fundamental structural constraints. Its oil exports are geographically tied to the Strait of Hormuz. Unlike some neighbors, Kuwait lacks a direct alternative route, leaving its trade and energy flows highly dependent on maritime access. There are partial contingency options using overseas storage, coordinating with the regional partners, or exploring overland routes, but these solutions are slower, significantly more expensive, and cannot replace full export volumes. By contrast, countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have invested in pipelines like bypass the Strait, reducing their exposure to such disruptions. For Kuwait, this means its economic continuity depends on the Strait's reopening. Contingency measures can mitigate the impact but cannot fully substitute maritime flows, and highlighting both the country's vulnerability and the strategic importance of maintaining open access.
Now, I want to move on to another topic, and as the Zionist occupation has intensified its regional campaign, leading to widespread disruption. Politically, how does this shift the balance of power within the Gulf Cooperation Council countries regarding our collective reliance on Western security guarantees?
The intensification of Israeli military campaign is promoting a strategic rethink across the GCC, especially regarding reliance on Western security guarantees. For decades, many years, Gulf security has centers on partnerships with the United States and, to a lesser extent, with the NATO. Rising regional volatility and perceptions of selected or delayed responses are pushing GCC states to diversity. This doesn't mean breaking ties with the West, but increasing regional coordination, boosting defense spending, and engaging pragmatically with multiple global powers. Within the GCC, influence may shift toward states with greater military capacity, while efforts to build collective security frameworks accelerate. In short, reliance on Western guarantees is evolving into a multi-layered strategy that combines external alliance with stronger regional self-reliance.
That is a perfect way to sum up the answer. Now, with the April 6th deadline approaching, what is the strategic risk to Kuwait's infrastructure if diplomacy fails and the region enters a prolonged state of economic siege?
As the April 6th deadline approaches, Kuwait faces a strategic risk that goes beyond economic pressure, like infrastructure vulnerability if diplomacy fails, and a prolonged economic siege. Critical assets, oil facilities, ports, power stations, and desalination plants, and this is very important, could face direct or indirect disruptions. Kuwait's dependence on the Strait of Hormuz also strains supply chains for fuel and food and essential imports. The threat isn't only physical. Operational disruptions, including cyber attacks, shipping blockages, and logistical pressures are equally concerning. We can say the crisis persists, safeguarding critical infrastructure and ensuring rapid response capabilities are essentials for Kuwait's national resilience.
Now, Kuwait has recently seen its non-oil growth projections challenged. How can the government maintain its 2035 vision development projects under the shadow of such extreme regional volatility?
Okay, Kuwait's non-oil growth projections are under pressure due to extreme regional volatility. But the government can still advance its 2035 vision development projects by prioritizing resilience and flexibility. The key steps include focusing on projects with high strategic and economic impact, and facing investment to match available liquidity, and leveraging public-private partnerships to share risk. The state can also draw on sovereign funds and low public debt to maintain momentum, while ensuring the contingency planning for delays or cost overruns. Ultimately, progress depends on balancing ambition with pragmatism, continuing development where feasible, while adapting timelines and financing strategies to regional uncertainties.
Kuwait is indeed adapting to the situation as the streets are still being laid out and they're being fixed up. The change of 30% of workforce in government institutions, switching to online classes for students, just showcases that just because we're going through this current temporary, hopefully, crisis does not mean that it would halt everything, obviously. Reports indicate that Kuwait Petroleum Corporation has officially curtailed production. Is this a strategic move to preserve resources or a necessary reaction to the lack of available export routes?
Okay, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation's production its curtailment likely reflects both strategic and operational considerations. On one hand, it can be seen as deliberate measures to preserve reserves and manage fiscal sustainability and amid market uncertainty. On the other hand, it is also a necessary response to the lack of available export routes without access to the Strait of Hormuz, producing at full capacity risk storage bottlenecks and financial losses. In practice, we could say that the decision balances long-term resource management with the immediate logistical constraints, ensuring Kuwait can maintain economic stability while navigating regional disruptions.
So indeed, the move is both a strategic move and a necessary reaction. It's a strategic necessary reaction, one might call it. From a strategic standpoint, how does the recent targeting of commercial port infrastructure like Mbarak al-Kabir affect our long-term status as a regional trade hub?
The recent targeting of a commercial port infrastructure, such as the Mbarak al-Kabir, poses a serious strategic challenge to Kuwait's long-term status as a regional trade hub. Disruptions to port operations not only slow the flow of imports and exports by also undermine investor confidence in regional connectivity. This is a very big thing. That's what happened, unfortunately. And we could say while the damage may be repairable, but repeated attacks could encourage trading partners and logistics from the other ports also, like Min al-Shuwaif operation to rely alternative ports in the Gulf, gradually eroding Kuwait's competitive positions. Strategically, this underscores the importance of hardening infrastructure, diversifying trade routes, and integrating contingency plans to maintain Kuwait's role as a reliable and resilient hub in the region.
Now, there is a growing inflationary shock across the Gulf, which is a topic that is on the mind of everyone living in the Gulf, here regionally and globally. But how does national strategy account for the political risk of rising costs for basic goods during a period of regional war?
The growing inflationary shock across the Gulf presents both economic and political risks, especially during regional conflict now. Rising costs for basic goods can quickly trigger public dissatisfaction and social pressures. Kuwait's national strategy addresses this by maintaining subsidized and targeted support for essential items. Using sovereign reserves to buffer price shocks, and ensuring supply chain continuity, particularly through maritime routes like the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, the government monitors market stability, adjusts fiscal measures proactivity, and engages in regional coordination to prevent panic buying or shortages. In short, managing inflation during war requires balancing economic tools with social stability to protect both citizens and national resilience.
It also indeed includes maintaining awareness so people wouldn't panic buy and overstock supplies so that everyone can eventually have what they need. Moving on, Russia and China are increasingly involved in the diplomatic discourse. Strategically, should Kuwait look toward a multipolar alliance to secure its economic interests in the future?
With Russia and China increasingly active in regional diplomacy, Kuwait faces a strategic choice. Continue relying primarily on traditional Western alliances or explore a more multipolar approach. A multipolar strategy would mean engaging with multiple global powers to diversity, economic and security partnerships, reducing dependence on any single actor. This could enhance resilience, open new trade and invest channels, and provide greater leverage in regional negotiations. However, it requires careful balancing to avoid alienating existing partners and to maintain credibility. We could say strategically, Kuwait's best path is a pragmatic, multi-layered approach, deepening traditional alliance while selectivity engaging with emerging powers to safeguard long-term economic and political interests.
Now, as a closing question, if the regional crisis extends into the summer, what is the strategic plan for ensuring the continuity of essential services, especially electricity and water, which are heavily fuel dependent?
If the regional crisis extends into the summer, ensuring continuity of essential services like electricity and water becomes critical, since both are heavy fuel dependent. Kuwait's strategy focuses on multiple layers of resilience, like maintaining strategic fuel reserves, optimizing power generation and desalination capacity, and implementing demand management measures if necessary. Contingency plans also include emergency response terms, rapid repair capabilities, and coordination with the regional partners to secure alternative supplies. The goal is to prevent service interruptions, safeguard public welfare, and maintain operational stability even under prolonged regional disruptions. In short, continuity planning combines preparedness and resource management and rapid response to protect essential services through the peak summer period.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Al-Salal, for giving us a moment of your time so you could help us answer some current questions in our viewers' minds. Now, before we continue, let's take a look onto this report regarding latest attacks on Iran.
Regional tensions have escalated sharply after Iran announced that several of its nuclear facilities were targeted in recent airstrikes, including key sites in Arak and Yazd province. According to international reports, these strikes hit the Khundab heavy water facility near Arak, as well as a uranium processing site in Ardakan. These locations are considered critical to Iran's nuclear program. Therefore, the attacks mark a significant escalation by directly targeting sensitive nuclear infrastructure. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities confirmed the incidents but stated that no radioactive leakage has been detected so far. Officials also confirmed that the International Atomic Energy Agency has been notified, aiming to limit international concern and maintain transparency. At the same time, Iran announced that it's actively studying possible responses to the attacks. Officials stated that all options remain under consideration as military and strategic assessments are ongoing. Furthermore, Tehran emphasized that any response will be carefully calculated and carried out at a time and manner of its choosing, signaling a measured but firm approach. These developments come amid heightened tensions involving Iran, the United States, and the Israeli occupation, raising fears of further escalation. Analysts warn that targeting nuclear facilities represents a dangerous turning point, increasing the risk of a wider regional conflict.
تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها للاستجابة للطوارئ والكوارث في ظل الأوضاع الجيوسياسية الحاصلة في المنطقة. جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي تعمل من ضمن منظومة إنسانية متكاملة مع مؤسسات دولة الكويت من حيث الاستجابة السريعة وتجهيز المتطوعين من ضمن أفرقة مختلفة للاستجابة للطوارئ في سرعة قصوى. يعد متطوعين جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي من المتطوعين اللي تم تدريبهم مكثفاً في الإسعافات الأولية والاستجابة للكوارث والاستجابة الميدانية. تؤكد جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي جاهزيتها الميدانية ورفع جاهزيتها من حيث الاستجابة للطوارئ في حالات اللي يتم ندائها. بالنسبة للمخزون الاستراتيجي لجمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي فإحنا على أتم الاستعداد للاستجابة في حال النداء من قبل مؤسسات حكومة دولة الكويت.
الحرس الوطني قادة وقواته دائما على استعداد وجاهزية تامة لحماية الوطن بالتعاون مع زملاء السلاح في وزارتي الدفاع والداخلية وقوة الإطفاء العام، وتقديم الدعم والإسناد لكافة جهات الدولة، خاصة في أوقات الأزمات والطوارئ. ونسأل الله أن يحفظ وطننا الكويت من كل مكروه في ظل قيادته الرشيدة.
The global response to this crisis is unfolding rapidly in the world's major capitals, and London is at the heart of this diplomatic storm. As the UK government balances its regional alliances with a mounting domestic cost of living crisis, the eyes of the world are on Downing Street. Joining us live from London is our correspondent, Jamal Shaheen. Jamal, thank you for being with us once again.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me in this program.
Our first question is about the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who recently chaired a COPRA meeting to address the economic and domestic impacts of the regional war. What are the specific measures being discussed in London to protect the British public from the sudden spike in energy and food prices?
This is the third COPRA meeting from the beginning of this war. If we can, this is very fluid situation here in the UK, not only in the oil and the gas price, and also it's very important for the UK. The UK have a very deep-rooted relationship. We can call internal relationship with the GCC country, especially with Kuwait. From the beginning, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refused to join Israeli and American bombing in Iran. But after a couple of days, when they discovered the appalling attack from Iranian regime to the GCC country, they changed their mind and they take a defensive solution. They send more assist to the Middle East. This is the first time we have the highest number of Typhoon fighter and F-35 in the region since 15 years. And also they send a new teams who can deal with the drone and also long missile. According to the Ministry of Defense, they have more than 1,000 hours from the UK pilot in defensive activity for the GCC country. So in the same time, yesterday, there's a warning from second largest petrol station owner called Asda. There is some shortage of the fuel in some area in the country. That means the crisis is not only in the Middle East, it's here in the street. This is why the COPRA meeting announced it have a take emergency measurement to protect the oil and the gas and the fuel market here in the UK, especially the gas market. They announced nearly $70 million, to support the most vulnerable family, which is needed because of the rising and soaring of the cost of gas and energy here in the UK.
Now, the British government recently confirmed that US forces are being permitted to use UK bases for what they call collective self-defense in the region. How is the decision being viewed by the British public and the opposition, especially given the history of UK involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts?
This is a very complicated issue. It's a big dilemma, not only for the UK, but for the street and the public. It's very complicated for the UK Prime Minister, who have a specific relationship, who always said and proud was the strategic relationship with the US and with the United States of America. And in the same time, you have the same deep-rooted relationship with GCC country. When you refuse from the beginning to give or granted access to the UK to use its military base, after 24 hours, it's allowed to use some. Then, a week ago, there is a high delegation from senior official and intelligence and military was in the United States. And then we heard in the weekend that the UK have a meeting with some minister and then granted the access to use Diego Garcia and the military base here in the UK for the Bomba, which have the most advanced plane in the world that can attack Iran. They allow also the joint military base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, which can make the United States use this military base to reach to Iran without need to refuel again or air fuel, which is very strategic issue. So the situation here is very fluid. It's moving fast. From the beginning, we have the opposition asked the Prime Minister to join the war. But the Prime Minister said, no, this is not our war. There is no comprehensive plan what will happen after the war. And then, because the war take more time than the President Donald Trump announced before, some of the UK position is now saying, yes, this is not our war, this is not the war, we're looking for a solution, a comprehensive solution. We should cooperate it with European countries and GCC countries to find a solution, to de-escalate the situation, and also find a solution to guarantee the free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, which, if I quote from the Foreign Secretary Yvette Kuba, she announced yesterday Iran is taking the world economy or the global economy as a hostage by closing the Strait of Hormuz, which nearly 20% of the global energy go through this very narrow strait. This is very problematic here. But Keir Starmer is very proud about leadership, not followership. But in the same time, there is another issue here. It's internal issue. Keir Starmer is very scared to lose the local election in May. If we take into account what's happened a month ago when Aplama was supporting Gaza won a seat in Manchester, this seat it holds and reserved for the Labour Party and the government for more than 100 years, and they lost it because the public is very angry about the position of Mr. Keir Starmer from what's happening in Gaza. Even if he's a huge shift and recognize the Palestinian state, but genocide was committed there. Makes the public is very angry. So the Prime Minister in a big dilemma at this time.
Indeed, Jamal. Now, we have seen reports of Trumpflation hitting the UK mortgage and lending market. Can you explain how the conflict, thousands of miles away from the UK, is now directly affecting the average British citizen's ability to secure a home or manage their debts?
First of all, even if there is a mileage away, don't forget nearly 500,000 of the UK citizens live in GCC country, especially in UAE and the Kuwait and the other. So one of the most important things, this is the street and the city are very twins. It's a dream. Most of people traveling to the United to GCC country. So what's happened there is very common here. Most 95% of the UK families have someone working or live in GCC country. So it is common here. And there is an expectation from OCDE, which is a very respectable organization, expect if the wars will continue for more than 4 weeks, that means the interest rate will be higher again. There was like expectation, the circle of interest rate should be go down to 2.5, but now they hold the interest rate. The governor of Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, he expects maybe the committee will raise the interest rate again. If we raise the interest rates again, that means the mortgage and what people will pay, it's more higher. Last 2 weeks, we see a huge increase of the price of gas and petrol. That means the bill will be higher. According to another UK Economic Institute, expect if this war is continuing, the price of gas will soaring between 15% to 60%. It depending about how this will go on. So this is very, very complicated, and the economic situation here is very vulnerable. It's not stable. So anything it will have, if the wars continue in the Middle East and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz will continue, that means the UK economy will have a hugely impact in a negative way. That means the inflation will go up again, which was very simple. The only thing which Keir Starmer is very proud about, the inflation has gone down from 11% to 3%. It would be go higher again, which is nothing to have.
Indeed, this is an idea to think about. There is significant diplomatic movement in London as the April 6 pause on strikes nears its end. Is there any indication from the Foreign Office that the UK is acting as a backdoor channel for a negotiated settlement between the coalition and Tehran?
Yes, we hear about this, but the problem here, I was in a conversation with a former Middle East minister, and he was also a deputy of the defense minister. The whole European official is very worried about what the United States did. According to them, they think the efficiency plan, which did it by the U.S. government, like when Mr. Donald Trump was in the beginning of in power this year, which that means the release of most of people who have a good experience in the State of Department because of the efficiency plan by Elon Musk, and most of people was going away and there is no job. This is why we see now what's happened. The law without any understanding or comprehensive plan what will happen next. This is why the people here think the United States and Israel is committed something without any comprehensive plan. So whatever they have, let's back to your question again. There is Keir Starmer and also the French President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor and also nearly 10 countries have a comprehensive plan. Was agreed by 40 countries to find a solution to secure the navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Also, they have a meeting. The chief of staff of the army of nearly 30 countries have a meeting last week, but there is no any other plan because it's too risky to find a solution. The only solution is to have de-escalate the situation according to the British government. They should like Oman, Egypt, and Pakistan and the other country, because the United States now, there is a little tension between the political administration, even the cooperation between the military and intelligence is still in the highest level. But it is too risky to send the troops, it is too risky to send ships there, but whatever they can do, there is no clear plan how this war will end. This is one of the most problematic issues here in the United States, in United Kingdom and Europe. Also, Europe was very high concern about what's happened when they left a sanction and the Russian oil, which means the Russian will benefit nearly 150 billion US dollar from this oil. The European is very concerned about how this will affect the war in Ukraine. If we back to the war in Ukraine, Europe is still suffering from these sequences of the war of Ukraine. Europe can't afford to take the responsibility of the war in economic issue. It's a big dilemma for Europe. But they don't have other option. The only option is to work through cooperated with the United States, with other country, and the only thing I have known, it's a contact between Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, and David Kuba, the foreign minister of the United Kingdom last week. And also the contact between the Iranian president and the French president. But there is no any outcome. How they will sort out the war? There is the only positive news we have today, it's from Pakistan. This is why the UK and the European country is making its efforts through other mediators.
Now, our final question: with inflation projections in the UK being revised upward to 3.5% for the upcoming months, what is the atmosphere like on the streets of London? Is the government facing significant pressure to pull back from the conflict to prioritize domestic economic stability?
Again, how they can do it? Nearly 20% of the energy, of the global energy is coming from the Strait of Hormuz. There is no other option. As I said before, the war in Ukraine makes them suffer. This will make it more complicated for them. They don't have other option to secure the fuel. Even there is a campaign now refuel threatened by the conservative leader, Kimi Bando. The governor of Bank of England said, we can't predict anything. This is very fluid situation. Nobody can predict anything. It depends about how the situation in Middle East will continue. If it takes like 2 weeks, it's fine. They can find a solution. But after 2 weeks, there is also a little warning that after 2 weeks, there is the whole reserve of the global from the oil will be in a critical situation, the lowest in the history. Don't forget, the nearly 30 countries agreed to release 400 barrels of oil from the reserve, which is a huge number. But within 2 weeks to 3 weeks, this number will be in the lowest level. They need a solution. And also there is a huge demand. Yesterday, there was some queues about at the petrol station to storage the petrol station. And in some petrol station, there is a shortage. There is no fuel for them. This is big. This is very big, complicated. Also, I will one more point. Yesterday, there is a committee from the UK Parliament advised and have a recommendation to Europe and the UK to find other option to depend or to take it, because maybe the United States will not be the allies you can depend on in defense. They said take other option with European country, with NATO, and they should have their own strategy in defense and war, and also in economic situation and securing the energy, the energy and the fuel for their own countries.
Now, if actually there is one more, I have a couple of more questions. If the April 6th deadline passes without a ceasefire, what is the nightmare scenario for the UK and Europe's security in the coming months?
The nightmare scenario is not what I will say. What the OCDE said yesterday in its report, that means the oil will be reached $150 for the barrel. That means this will be in the second quarter of this year. That means in the near future. If this has happened, that means the inflation will go in UK to the nearly 4%, and the GDP growth will be minimized or declined by 0.5% here in the UK and in Europe. This will be a big problem for the UK government, which need to increase its defense spending from 3% to 3.5%. And also there is a growing demand to increase it to 5% from its GDP. This will be a big problem for them, even if they have in the short term, they don't have other solution. But yes, in longer term, they can find a solution. But the worst case scenario, it will be disaster in economy and in political. If we take this to account, after 4 weeks we have a local election. That means if the prime minister have a problem if he not win this local election and the economic situation becomes the worst case scenario, that means there is a vote of confidence of his position. Maybe he will retire or quit, or have a vote to remove him from as a leader of the Labour Party, and we will have a new prime minister. There is a growing demand about this issue here in the UK. At the same time, in Europe, they faced nearly the same problem. 2 days ago, there was a meeting for 10 European countries in Baltic Sea and in North and West Europe. They supported any action can secure the energy and secure the fuel on this country in the future, and they are working together how they can find a solution to allow the free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. There is no other solution in short term for Europe if the war is continuing.
Like you said, Jamal, in short, there is no other solution. The best solution is a complete halt of aggressions on all ends from all parties. Thank you, Jamal Shaheen, our correspondent for London. And we'll take a quick break and we will back to you, dear viewers.
بتوجيهات مباشرة ومتابعة حثيثة ومتواصلة من قبل مجلس الوزراء ووزيرة الشؤون الاجتماعية الدكتورة أمثال الحويلة، سارعت وزارة الشؤون إلى وضع الخطط المسبقة التي تهدف من خلالها إلى المحافظة على مستويات المخزون الاستراتيجي من السلع المواد الغذائية والاستهلاكية، ولضمان سلاسة وسهولة تدفقها إلى الأسواق التعاونية. قامت وزارة الشؤون ممثلة بقطاع التعاون بتشكيل 6 فرق ميدانية بواقع فريق لكل محافظة، وذلك للمتابعة اليومية للتأكد من كفاية المخزون الاستراتيجي. إن هذا العمل هو ثمرة تنسيق وتخطيط مسبق مع جهات الدولة المختصة التي وضعت لضمان استدامة الأمن الغذائي في مختلف الأوقات، ودامت الكويت بحفظ الله ورعايته.
Now, our dear audience, as we reach the end of this special coverage, the picture before us is clear yet heavy with responsibility. Through our detailed reports, we have seen the tangible impact of the escalation, from the damage at our vital gateways to the tireless work of our air defense teams who remain our first line of protection. Our distinguished guests on the phone calls and Zoom provided us with the strategic, political, and military context as well as economic to understand this pivotal point in our history. The message from Kuwait this afternoon is one of unity. While the Israeli occupation continues its aggression and the war with Iran creates ripples of instability across the Gulf, Kuwait stands firm. We are not merely observers. We are a nation that prioritizes the safety of its citizens and residents and the sanctity of its soil above all else. We urge all our viewers to follow the official directives of the Ministry of Interior and the Civil Defense. In times of trial, our strength has always been our cohesion and our trust in the leadership of this land. I want to thank our guests for their valuable insights and our correspondents from Tokyo and London for their bravery. And most importantly, I also thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. We will continue to provide around-the-clock updates as the situation develops. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and may Allah protect Kuwait, its leadership, and its people from every harm. I am Sheikha Tamimi. Be safe and stay tuned.